So, who's got the first question for the panel? Jim, what we'll do is we'll bring you a handheld mic. Woof! It whistles as well.
Hello, yeah, on. Hi, Jim Law from Find a Player. Question for Lucy. Really interested what you were saying about the personalisation and how customers expect that and require it. I was just wondering if there's a line where you can take it too far, and I'll give you an example of why I'm asking this. I woke up one morning and my phone told me that my drive to work was going to be 15 minutes, and I'd never told my phone where I worked, and that totally freaked me out. So
was it your phone?
It was my phone, yeah. And at that point I thought, I'm turning off my location services because Google's tracking me all the time, and I'm just I never asked it to do that. So is there a level where you can take it too far and actually freak the customers out by knowing too much about them?
Absolutely. There is a fine level, and there's a lot of talk about this at the moment, about getting that balance right. And my advice to any advertiser or any business is to think about it as yourself. What is that level? And that level was shocking you. I think where we are at the moment is trying to make sure that we're being much more visible with the data that we as advertisers or businesses hold on people. So yes, an email address or a postcode, which I talked about earlier on, they're all things that you share all the time. When it invades your personal space, as I was talking about on your mobile, that is quite intrusive. And I think when we first started getting adverts on mobiles, a lot of us were, how rude of you to be talking to me on my personal device. Like, I think you're right, it's finding that balance. I don't have the holy grail of what that should be, but I think I would start by saying, what is it that you would expect? I think coming back to the fact that we're all consumers, we're all people, getting that balance right it'll be interesting to see what happens this year. There's a lot happening at the moment to make sure that we get that right, and I think if we can just be really visible with what we're doing, then we're okay.
Great.
Yeah?
Yeah.
So be really open with what you've got is what I'm saying.
No, I think the balance is, you're absolutely right, because I also had Facebook trying to sell me my own house, which really freaked me out.
That's cool.
Yeah, I wasn't really, I was like, sell me my own house? Yeah, it wasn't good, but anyway, thanks very much, good answer, thanks.
So we've got a question, very good. We've got a question that's come in through Twitter. I'm going to direct this at you, Chris. Basically it's saying is, what is funding like for UK tech startups, and are there any trends developing and along that line?
I think funding, there's probably a huge shift, which you mentioned before, Jim, about obviously crowdsourcing becoming a real, a valuable tool now, and I think it's certainly for any kind of aspiring companies who are trying to get funding, then there's a huge kind of opportunity there to be as a viable option for crowdfunding. I think in terms of a trend for the types of business that seem to be getting funded more, big marketplaces become interesting. I think traditional kind of financiers and venture capitalists are beginning to change their mindset to stop asking, when are you going to make money? And that begins to have shifted a lot more about this usership model. So I think for those businesses who are in that type of space, I think the funding is rife at the moment. So I think it's quite a good place to be in terms of the UK trying to get funded.
Does anyone else in the audience feel that the UK or particular areas of the UK, do we feel that you have to be in London to get funded for tech, or are places like Scotland and the regions, have they got their own angel networks that are working? Anyone there?
I think it's definitely harder up here. I think there's much more VC money and angel money in London. I think it's starting to change now, and from what we're hearing, speaking to likes of Crowdcoop, it's definitely a good option. But I think it's certainly harder up in Scotland than it is in London.
So what the audience are saying is it's harder. It appears to be a bit harder here in Scotland. That might be the same. That might be able to extrapolate that to the regions as well. But there seems to be a bit of an appetite down in London. I've had another one come in. I'll maybe ask. We'll put this to all members of the panel on that's coming on Twitter. I want to start a tech business. Do I employ an in-house CTO, Chief Technical Officer, or do I outsource my tech initially?
I would come back to the point I made about MVP. Before you start, first of all, I want to start a tech business is something that
That's what I thought.
always terrifies me in some ways. It's like, well, what is the business? What is the business you want to go into? What is the industry? And why is technology necessarily the solution? So I think there needs to be some thinking around that. But really thinking about what is the most low-cost tech solution that you could do. Now, you've got incredible tools at your disposal. Like things like eBay, like things like Gumtree, where you can actually begin businesses without actually owning any of the tech yourself. And it begins to give you a real interesting insight, and then you can start thinking about employing people. So I think that would probably be the approach that I would try and take.
Stuart, you obviously you've got a tech team, and you've obviously gone through huge growth. What do you think about that?
I think whatever option you take, it probably doesn't matter whether you do it in-house or outsource it, but as long as you protect yourself by making sure you've got some kind of contract that the IP remains with you for anything that's created, and that doesn't have to be double back twisters and 50 grand to our learned friends. It's just something that says that the work that's created, I retain ownership over at the end, or if you're employing them, that it's in the contract of employment. So it doesn't really matter. Pick one and do it.
Lucy, there's one come in directed specifically for you. What's the best way to market my service online? There's no pressure with that one.
The best way to market my service online, well, if it's a service and providing a service for people, I'd want to understand more about that. So I'd want to understand why you over someone else. So for me, and this is my opinion, so I'm not saying it is the right opinion, I'd want to understand those emotional hooks as to why this is the right business for me. So I want to see other people use it. So social media is probably a really good place to be. I'm not saying that should be just it, but you can certainly have conversations with people, or people can start looking as to why choose you over someone else.
We actually look at the difference between disruption and displacing as well. So we don't believe in creating more vehicles on the road. We actually believe in optimizing the current infrastructure. So if you look, there's existing industries that are huge, absolutely ginormous, that already exist, that all they need is just a kind of a reimagination, and that's kind of us as a company. We work with licensed taxis within the UK. We feel that not putting more vehicles on the road is actually a smarter use of doing things, and I think that's where I think disruption is a kind of a nice term, but actually it's just reimagination and kind of an existing product.
And I'm speaking personally. I cabbied for 15 years.
Okay.
And I often, like Friday night, taking someone into city centre, and you know there's people waiting an hour in a taxi, and you've got one person in the back of the seat, and saying there must be other people going in the same direction.
Of course.
It's crazy.
And being able to obviously begin to track all that data. That, if you think about it, there's roughly 1,400 taxis driving around Glasgow now. We don't actually know where they are. Like, no one actually can pull that data together. By these types of apps, and even with smartphones, you begin to understand how cities, if we're talking about transport, how they actually work. So for example, if maybe people are going the same direction, then yes, you can group them together. Or maybe that actually taxis are required at the airport between 8 and 9 every morning. Well, yes, we can begin to actually learn things and provide better service. So, totally agree.
I'm just going to take one more from the online folks, then I'll come back to you over there. What, to all three of you, what's been the best and the last business or tech book that you have read?
I haven't read a book for a very long time, would be my answer to that.
So what's your favourite marketing blog? Or
I read, from a tech perspective, I like TechCrunch, and I like Mashable from a mix between the two. E-consultancy, those are the main three that I have on my phone that I always look at, but I don't read books. Books, if we're thinking like marketing books, marketing hasn't changed, so I don't actually believe that new marketing books can tell us anything new. It's all based on the same principles, it's all based on people. It's like a stuck record, don't I? But I think we can get so much more from little snippets of blogs and the interesting things that are going on. I mean, there is so much data out there. Reading about new companies that were launching yesterday on TechCrunch, if I had my head in a book, I wouldn't know anything about that.
Stuart?
Yeah. I read
And
lo- I
you've no
read-
time to read a book.
Well, I'm an insomniac, so I have got time to read a book. But I would echo that, though. I think there's a balance between what you lead, long intake versus the tech crunches and the trying to keep abreast of what's current and new and different that you can cross fertilise and bring into your own business. Seen something that's successful in one sector that just isn't being adopted. In the last 3 years, we did a thing where we took lots of tech that existed for retailers and flipped it into the legal space. And that was from reading an article talking about a poor cross-selling in legal firms. So it wasn't the ASDA, but it was inspiration.
But it gives you that idea, Chris.
I'm lucky. I've just been on holiday for 2 weeks, so I have actually.
Damn it.
Yeah, I read an interesting book which is called The Outside Edge, which is probably worth checking out. It's about kind of how outsiders can be tech entrepreneurs and how you can leverage your personality type to become an entrepreneur. It's quite an interesting one. One of my favourite books, though, is a book called Winning, and it's by Clive Woodward, the England rugby manager. It's not tech-based, but some of the principles there are absolutely fantastic. But I'd really echo the points we've had here in terms of data. I'm a huge believer in infographics and being able to actually leverage data and absorb data in a different way, whereas I think traditional kind of reading and sitting and reading a book can sometimes be quite difficult. So being able to look at an infographic and take something away, I think can actually provide you with far greater insight, particularly in the startup community.
Can you give the lady at the back the microphone? Yep.
Hi there. The question's for Chris. Chris, see when you put your tablets into these like shops or hotels or restaurants, whatever the case would be, did you do it for free or do you actually charge?
Totally free.
Totally free, brilliant.
Yeah.
Okay, just in front of you, John.
Hi, John Wilmot, CEO of Nameloop. This question's for Chris again. Your first funding round was $2 million back in February 2010. Can you just tell us about that process and just what stage the company was at that time in terms of user numbers, revenue?
Yeah, so we helped that. So the founder of Get Taxi, I'm not the founder of Get Taxi, unfortunately, guys, otherwise. Unfortunately not. The founder of Get Taxi was a 6-time entrepreneur, so this is actually his 6th company. So it kind of goes some way to begin to, the network was already built, I think, to be able to raise initial round of funding. Now, how that transpires to companies here, then I wouldn't necessarily say that's a prerequisite to be able to raise funding, but very much that funding round and the second funding round was very much based on the concept that we still didn't really have a product that was actually fully functional at that point. And then when we did launch, we actually launched in Israel to be able to actually test the product in a smaller market rather than launching in London. So it really comes back to the MVP stuff and the initial kind of user thing that we were trying to resonate. But that's where the funding round was actually built upon, and it was some quite forward-thinking investors who kind of saw the size of the idea early on, as opposed to, well, how much revenue are you making right now? And I think that's where it ties into what we were talking about with funding beginning to change. So I think quite an interesting ability to raise at that level, but purely based on the idea, really.
A question came in online for Stuart. It's basically saying, as you've built your tech business, what are the lessons you've learned in hiring techies?
Attitude first, skills second.
Attitude first, skills second.
Yeah. I'd rather have an 8 out of 10 or a 9 out of 10 techie with social skills than a 10 out of 10 techie that will disrupt the whole shop, and there are loads of them.
Okay. So can I pick you up on that and say that some of the techies that I've come across who haven't really done anything with tech, but they love being in tech spaces, do you think there's a culture out there of wanting to be super sophisticated and understand Java and just talk tech as opposed to actually commercialise it?
I do think there is a culture. I think to step back from a tech, I think clever people make complicated things simple, and idiots do it the other way around. And I think sometimes techies are nothing in their life up to that point, Jim, has divested them of the view that it's not great to get it down and dirty in the detail and make everybody else really excited about it.
Okay.
Not everybody's interested, you know.
Lucy, this one's coming for you from online. What's the biggest mistake people make when undertaking online customer acquisition?
Usually, I mean, this is about as technical as I get, they've got the Google Analytics set up incorrectly. I can't say any more than that.
Yeah.
And also in terms of acquisition, because when you haven't got your Google Analytics set up properly, you don't understand where people are coming from and where the blockers are. And also in terms of acquisition, I work in a lot of multimedia campaigns. All the big brands we talked about that you introduced me with, they're all multimedia campaigns. And I think the mistake that we make is we focus on that last click. So it might be looking like that mobile video or PPC is the thing that's driving acquisition, and actually it's not. It could have been that great, it could be the Asda example, it could be the moment that you had with them in a space that can't be clicked, although yours can be. It could be a moment that hasn't been attributed, that's all playing towards the whole multimedia landscape. So it's about getting your attribution model right, which is a very difficult thing to do.
Yeah, I think it's linked though, Jim, to acquisition as a whole. I think we are fascinated with CPI and for us CPD of downloads. To be totally honest, the number of people who've downloaded our app, we don't really care. It's about people who actually use, and it's about people who actually need the product. And I think in terms of acquisition, it's almost like traditional business when you used to look just at revenue, but actually look a little bit further down at the bottom line. There's actually a very similar point to be made, is in fact it's fantastic getting lots of people to your website or lots of high traffic, but actually how does it translate? So I think that's my view on acquisition. I think sometimes it can be kind of misconstrued of what you're actually trying to acquire.
I'm going to make a short statement, but I'm going to ask the panel before if I could ask you to think about one or two bullet points that you would give the audience to say, go away with this in your head as you build or grow or scale your tech company. Interestingly, as we grow throughout the UK, as Entrepreneurial Spark powered by NatWest grows throughout the UK, the amount of money that we're spending right now in customer acquisition, as in when you go to different cities and we're trying to get into people's Facebooks, so they go, oh, what's that? So you're interested in startup, you've hit venture capital, you've hit funding, oh, you must be interested in startup, so reaching them. But actually, and it comes back to what Lucy said earlier on, and I think it will happen with Get Taxi, word of mouth is one of the most powerful human viral expressions you can get. So in Glasgow, Edinburgh and Ayrshire, we actually don't spend a lot of money, because Chiclets, ex-Chiclets alumni, people seeing stuff, people saying, oh, you should go into Entrepreneurial Spark, or do you want funding? That actually generates all our applications up here. So I wonder, as an experiment over the next 3 years, if we can get it to a stage where we hardly need to spend any money and we've got the stickiness out there that people are actually virally talking about it. See where it goes. So, do you want to finish off with your finishing statements? Chris?
My one would be, I'd probably just have one point, and it'd just be, just go and launch tomorrow. Truly launch tomorrow. What is actually the worst that could happen is that it doesn't work and you have to launch again the day after. But that is the reality, so I think that's kind of my only real point.
Yep. Lucy?
Mine would be consumers. Really, hopefully that's come across about me today. Focus on people, focus on what your data's telling you, focus on talking to people. I think we all sit with computers in front of us a lot, and we actually, I'm sure you guys don't, but we actually forget to go out and talk to people and get them to test it, get them to tell you about it. And if you have got a business already, use the data that you've got to help you navigate this great world that we're in.
Thank you. Stuart?
Continual improvement. And I think the most important thing at the moment in tech space is the speed of iteration. Things are getting faster and faster and faster, and you can't have this big bang approach to doing things. So if you get it out quick and dirty, and you continually improve and you get it out slightly quicker and slightly dirtier, and it moves towards a place where it's maybe an elegant and clean and delicious thing, that's come quickly, but it's coming piecewise. So just keep at it, keep improving, but get it out. Go do's pretty damn succinct.
Hashtag go do. Folks, can I ask you to show your appreciation for a fantastic tech panel?